In what's been described as the most significant change in gang theme in more than a generation, the country's most notorious gang, the Mongrel Mob, plans on setting up an all-female chapter. It is hoped the chapter will be up and running by the end of next year. Leading gang researcher Dr. Jared Gilbert, author of an acclaimed history of gangs in New Zealand called Patched, joins us now from Christchurch. Good morning, Jared.
Good morning, Hayley.
How big a deal is this, the Mongrel Mob setting up an all-female chapter?
Oh, look, it's huge. It really is such a massive call by the Mongrel Mob. And remembering, actually, it is just a collection of chapters of the Mongrel Mob. So it's the Mongrel Mob Kingdom, which is based out of Hamilton. So it's a specific collection, not the Mongrel Mob as a whole. But this is absolutely massive. I think if you look at the history of gangs in New Zealand, from the very early stages when people put on patches in New Zealand, there were one or two women members. But as soon as the battles came, the insider-outsider distinction that the patches put on, those big gang wars that we became accustomed to in the 70s and the 80s, as soon as they began to start, women were seen as too vulnerable to protect the patch being the ultimate prize of war. So if you were in a fight and you took the patch, that was a prize. So they were seen as too vulnerable. And so the women weren't allowed to be patched. And then from there, of course, it became, so misogynist that these gangs became, the lot of women was terrible, really. Chattels there for domestic and sexual purposes only. And so from that to then proposing to give them membership is a remarkable transformation. Feminism's catching up even in the gang world, apparently.
Yes, I hope so, because the Mongrel Mob, I'm not sure you're the expert here, of course, but I've heard that they were notoriously the worst in their behaviour towards women.
Well, look, I think if this occurs, this will be a marker in the gang scene. This will be a pivot point in New Zealand gang history without question. So it's remarkable in that broad sense. But it's even more remarkable, I think, that it's coming from a series of chapters within the Mongrel Mob, because the Mongrel Mob have traditionally revelled in the idea that they are the worst of the worst. This is the group that was responsible for the Ambury Park rapes in 1986, these despicable acts that horrified New Zealand, the culture of blocking within the Mongrel Mob. We talk about rape culture. This was the pinnacle of that idea. They have come in an incredible way, but remembering, of course, that this is occurring within these chapters that have proven themselves to be thinking very differently in the last 5 or 6 years, this Mongrel Mob Kingdom. So they protected the mosque for 20 weeks in Hamilton after the March 15 terror attacks in Christchurch. They're promoting drug-free and fitness within their groups, and they're encouraging their members into work. So what we're seeing here is as part of a broader change within this hub within the Mongrel Mob. Incredibly interesting, forging new ground.
How big a change? You said that they were encouraging their members into work as such, but gangs have been known to be working in the black market, really, isn't it? Drugs and criminal activities, standover, whatever that they're needed to do outside of the market itself. Do you believe that these new focuses, the new direction is actually true, or is it a PR stunt?
Look, I don't think there's any doubt of the commitment of the Mongrel Mob Kingdom's leadership, without doubt. However, we have heard this periodically in the past that the mob is trying to change. Where Ambury Park occurred, that was meant to be a convention where the mob could show that they were going to move in a positive direction. So we have heard these things before, and so I think it's quite right for the public to be sceptical, and I think the leadership there will appreciate that. And so the proof will be in the pudding, as they say. The proof of the pudding is in the tasting. So we'll have to start to see some results out of this and to see some positivity, actually see it before we'll probably, before the public will accept it, of course.
What kind of new direction could a female chapter take the Mongrel Mob in?
Well, yeah, isn't that an interesting question? Impossible to speculate in some ways because it's unique. we've never been in this situation before. Often, you know, you ask a question like that, and I've got some history to sort of draw on, Hayley, here. My toolkit is bare because we've never seen it before. So exactly what occurs from here will be very interesting to remember. That this idea has been floated now, but there has been quite considerable pushback from different chapters of the mongrel mob around the country who see this as completely out of line. So whether or not it can get up and get over the line now is perhaps its first real test.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Jared Gilbert, sociologist and gangs expert.